Hello and welcome. I am Exolite and this is my channel. Today we're going to talk about the mysterious and frankly just plain weird death of a man in 1935. At the time, this man went by the name Roland T. Owen. So, get comfortable, settle in, and let's go on a bizarre trip into a bizarre murder mystery. In January of 1935, a tall, good-looking young man with a facial scar and a cauliflower ear entered the Hotel President in Kansas City, Missouri. And if you don't know what a cauliflower ear is, you might have heard it more recently as boxer's ear. And if you've ever seen the ear of a boxer who's been boxing for a long time, sometimes they have what looks like scar tissue. It's a deformity of the ear. So it used to be called cauliflower ear. This man asked for a single room, several floors up, for just one night. And just like any other hotel guest would, he paid the fee and he signed the register under the name of Roland T. Owen. Now, this man brought no luggage with him. But even so, the bellboy, Randolph Probst, went with him to his room, which was room number 1046, and on the way, Owen opened up to Probst about his original plans. Owen told Probst that he had originally planned to stay at another hotel called the Mulebach, but that he thought the cost of the room was too high there. Once the pair reached Owen's room, Owen removed several items from his pocket. He took out a comb, a toothbrush, and a hairbrush. He put them all in the bathroom, and then both men left the room. After Owens took the key from the bellboy, he left the hotel. Later on that day, a maid went to clean room 1046, which, by the way, can I just say, is weird. The maid went to clean the room after somebody checked in on the same day. I'm just saying. Owen, by that time, had returned to the room, and he told her it was okay to go ahead and clean up. He did, however, insist that the door remain unlocked, as he was expecting a visitor. As the maid went about cleaning, she noticed a few things. Owen had pulled the curtains closed tightly so that no light could come in, and he had just one single lamp lit. That was all the light that was in the room, but it was enough for her to notice that Owen seemed to be nervous or anxious. Before she was able to finish the room, Owen left, but he reminded her again to make sure she left the door unlocked when she was done. At about 4 p.m., the maid returned to the room with a bunch of fresh towels. Owen had returned to the room in the meantime, and when she went in, he was laying on the bed, fully clothed. Nothing else about the room was different, except there was a note on a table that someone had handwritten, and it read, "Dawn, I will be back in 15 minutes. Wait." So, whatever happened between then and 10:30 the next morning is uncertain. But once again, the maid came to clean the room, and when she did, she noticed that somebody had locked the hotel room door from the outside. But Owen was inside the room. He was found by her to be sitting in a chair, silently in the dark. She said that he seemed to be staring into the darkness. While she was in there, the phone rang, and Owen reached for the phone, picked it up, put it to his ear, and didn't speak, someone on the other line began speaking to him, and Owen replied after a minute, "No, Don, I don't want to eat. I am not hungry. I just had breakfast." Owen then hung up the phone and turned to the maid and mentioned to her the Muleback Hotel. He also asked her about the President Hotel and what she was supposed to do there. Strangely, she had been his maid for 2 days now. The maid said that it made her extremely uncomfortable. She went about her business and got out of there as quickly as she could. Later on that day, she returned to bring fresh towels to the room. Before she could enter the room, she heard a pair of male voices. From outside of the door, she explained why she was there. A new voice, which was not Owen's, bluntly told her that towels were not needed. So the maid simply left. Sometime after this exchange, a new guest registered at the hotel. This new guest was a woman who claimed that her name was Mrs. Jean Owen, but that she was not related to the Roland T. Owen. However, she was given the room next to his. Several times during the night, this Mrs. Owen was disturbed by sounds of an argument. She claimed that there was one male voice and one female voice. Then she heard sounds of a scuffle and a gasping noise. She reported that she assumed that to be somebody snoring. The nighttime elevator operator, Charles Blocker, also reported after-hours activity in the hotel. According to Blocker, there was a party taking place in room 1055, and a woman who looked familiar to him trying to find room 1026. Blocker said that he saw this same woman several times during the night, and the last time he saw her, she was in the company of a man. At 4 a.m., this woman left the hotel. The man she was seen with left about 15 minutes after her. Neither of them was ever identified. At 7 a.m., the phone in room 1046 was off the hook. The telephone operator at the hotel first noticed it. 3 hours later, it was still off the hook, so Probst was sent back to the room to put it back on the hook. When he arrived, Probst found the door was locked and a "Do Not Disturb" sign was hanging from the handle. Probst knocked, and it was invited in, but the door was still locked. So Probst knocked again and was once more told to come in and to turn on the lights, but the door was still locked. So Probst knocked another couple of times, but was still not actually let into the room. So by then, his patience had worn thin, and he hollered into the room to tell the occupant to replace the receiver on the phone. An hour and a half later, the operator noticed that the phone was still off the hook. So another bellboy, Harold Pike, was sent to investigate what was going on. When Pike went, he took the pass key with him and was forced to use it. When he walked in, Owen was lying on the bed without any clothes on. The telephone stand had been knocked over and the phone was lying on the floor. He assumed that Owen was drunk and sleeping off a hangover. So he put the phone on the stand and replaced the receiver. And then he left. Within an hour, the phone was reportedly off the hook once again. And one thing you can count on this hotel is that if your phone is off the hook, they're going to make sure that you put it back. Because Probst was sent to the room again. And like before, the sign was on the door saying "Do Not Disturb." Probst knocked a few times, but this time he got no answer from inside the room, so he used his pass key to go in. When he went inside, it was immediately evident that Owen wasn't suffering the effects of alcohol. He still had no clothes on, but he was crouched on the floor. His head was bloodied and the walls were soaked in blood. Probst fled from the room. He called his manager, and his manager called the police department. Owen was found naked inside his blood-soaked room, and before he passed out, he claimed that his injury was due to having fallen against the bathtub. Now, that fall must have been a doozy, because he'd also been tied up, beaten, strangled, and stabbed. And on the way to the hospital, he died from his injuries. The police officers began to search the room for clues. And what they didn't find was as strange as the things that they did find. There was not a single stitch of clothing found in the entire room. Plus, the standard hotel amenities such as shampoo and conditioner, soap, towels were all missing. Aside from the blood-soaked walls, police found evidence that someone else was in the room. A label from a tie was discovered. There were 4 fingerprints found on a lampshade, as well as a couple of discarded items. There was an unsmoked cigarette and a woman's hairpin. The police came to the conclusion that about 6 hours before he was discovered, Owen was tortured by a person or persons unknown for reasons that were unknown. Now, this conclusion to me seems off, considering that for hours before this, several times, there had been bellboys not only knocking on the door, but also entering the room. And they had not seen him in this condition. They had not heard any commotion. So, I don't know about that 6-hour timeline. However, the investigation into finding Roland T. Owen's killer didn't start off very well, because his name was actually not Roland T. Owen, but they had no clue as to what his real name was. So here's what they did. They put his corpse on public display in an effort to help identify him. Several people came forward and said that they knew him. Many bartenders stated that Owen was the man that they had seen in the company of several different women. Police did make a couple of discoveries that they might have found to provide a breakthrough. A man matching Roland T. Owen's description had actually spent some time at the Mulebach Hotel, as well as the Kansas City Hotel and the St. Regis Hotel. However, at the Mulebach, he went by Eugene Scott, which turned out to be another alias, and the staff at the Regis said that an unidentified man accompanied Owen at their hotel. Police then concentrated their efforts to find this Dawn that Owen had spoken to. But with only a first name, they couldn't find any evidence as to who this person might be. The funeral preparations were not being made until March, and because this was an unidentified man with no money, he was going to be buried in what they call a pauper's grave. Basically, what they do is they put a hole in the ground, they find the cheapest box possible, they put you in that, push the dirt over, and you may or may not even receive something stating the date of your death on top of your grave. Lots of times they just simply go unmarked. However, shortly before he was due to be buried, an anonymous phone call from a man that obviously never identified himself was answered by the head of the funeral home. The caller asked for the funeral to be delayed for just a short while so that money for the services could be sent over. The man claimed that he could potentially be Owen's brother-in-law and that Owen was indeed his genuine name. This caller also mentioned that Owen had gotten into some difficulties and that the investigators were on the, quote, wrong track. A few days later, money for the funeral arrived with no return address, and money was also sent to a local florist with the request that they make a wreath and attach a note that read, "Love forever, Louise." The funeral took place at Memorial Park Cemetery, and the only mourners there were the investigating officers who were watching for this unidentified man or Louise or any other suspect to show up. No one did. And it wasn't until a year and a half later that a woman from Birmingham, Alabama, saw a photo of Owen in the paper and immediately identified him as her long-lost brother, Artemis Ogletree. The woman who claimed to be Artemis's sister was named Eleanor, and she told the police that, as it turned out, approximately 1 year after Artemis died, they received the first of 3 letters that they were going to receive. And the family didn't know that Artemis had died yet. So when they received the first letter from Artemis, they had no idea that he had already passed away. Someone had briefly typed a message and sent the letter. Now, even not knowing that Artemis was dead, his mother, Ruby, was suspicious of this letter because Ruby said that Artemis would have written the letter, handwritten it, because as far as she was aware, Artemis didn't know how to type. Then, several months after the final letter arrived, which stated that Artemis was going to be sailing to Europe, a man calling himself Jordan phoned the family. Jordan provided an update on Artemis and said that his life was saved by their missing son and that he had married a woman in Cairo. When Ruby was shown a photo of Owen, she recognized him as her missing son, who, at the time of his death, would have been just 17 years old. So if Roland T. Owen was actually Artemis Ogletree, then it raises quite a lot of questions that really have no answers. Why did he use so many aliases? Who was this Dawn? Who was Louise? And what role, if any, did they play in his death? Why were there letters being sent to his family beginning a year after his death? What was he doing in Kansas? And what actually was the relationship with this man going by the name Jordan? We don't know. Was this Jordan the man seen at the hotel on the night that Owen or Artemis was brutally beaten and killed? Who paid for the funeral? Perhaps there will never be a solution to this murder. But police have reopened this cold case twice. The first time was in 1937, and the last time was in 2003. In 1937, detectives noticed a similar death that took place in New York. However, there was no link between the crimes or the victims that could be established. So once again, the Owen case went cold. Then renewed interest in the Roland T. Owen case surfaced in 2003 when someone got in touch with the Kansas City Public Library librarian, John Horner, by phone. The caller would not identify themselves, but they said that they were calling from outside of Missouri and that someone had recently passed away, and they didn't say who or how they knew them or were related to them. But while this person was scouring the belongings of the recently deceased person, he discovered a box full of old newspaper clippings. Every one of these clippings were about the murder of Roland T. Owen and the subsequent identity of Artemis Ogletree. This caller stated that in this box there was also something that the newspapers had mentioned, but the caller refused to say what that something was. And that caller was never heard from again. That box was never seen. So this case may never be solved, although there is somebody out there who found something related to the case as close as 2003. And perhaps they've told other people about it. Perhaps they showed it to people. Perhaps there is an answer. Because ever since 1936, the speculation has been rampant as to what exactly took place in room 1046. The honest truth is there's very little in the way of evidence to support any theory. Could it have been a professional hit? Was that the Don, as in a mafia Don, that he was speaking about? But would there be a hit on a teenager? Was there a love triangle gone wrong? And maybe that's why Owen, quote unquote, hit the bathtub? We may never know. Unless that caller, or someone that caller knows, steps forward with the truth that can close this case once and for all. Thank you for coming to my channel. If you enjoy my content, please go ahead and subscribe. It's free. And if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you would like to be notified every time I put up new content, you can click that bell. We do a lot of different content around here, and I also have weekly podcasts. If you would like to support this channel because you enjoy my work, please consider becoming a Patreon member, and I will put the link below in the subscription, and those funds will go directly to making merchandise for this channel that we can use for giveaways and sell if people are interested in that. Thank you.